All right, let's get to the sequel, which is Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. Came out in 2014, directed by Matt Reeves, who before this had done Cloverfield, the first one. Stars Gary Oldman, Kerry Russell, Annie Serkis, Cody Smith McPhee, Jason Clarke, Toby Kebbell, Kirk Acevedo. That's about it. Judy Greer. And the synopsis is the fragile peace between apes and humans is threatened as mistrust and betrayal threaten to plunge both tribes into a war for dominance over the earth. And as I said, this was the first one that I saw. I am pretty sure, if I'm not remembering incorrectly, I think the movie is amazing. Yes, there are a few little flaws that I'll get to in a little bit, but this is probably, along with War, spoiler, it is one of the best action movies, sci-fi movies of the 2010s. I would say even of the 21st century in general. I think there is such, and a lot of it has to do with Matt Reeves's direction, but there is such resonance in this movie. There is a lot of quiet and subtlety and restraint, and yet that makes it all the more interesting and all the more compelling in a lot of ways in comparison to Rise, because for one thing, Caesar is even more well developed in this one, and Andy Serkis is incredible in that performance, as he always is. And in terms of the conflict of the movie, I've heard some people compare it to, or it be an allegory for the Israeli Palestine conflict, which I can see that. There's a lot of other interpretations, I believe, but I can understand that, because one thing that's very, very interesting and to me stands out more than almost anything is how easily a war can be started and how violence can be started by, there can be 99 out of 100 people in a group or on both sides who are like, nope, I want peace, I want this, let's not fight, let's talk it out. And then there's one hothead, one trigger happy person who's like, nope, screw it, I'm mad at because of this, I want to cause some destruction. And then one act can cause this forever war that's been going on and leads into the other movie as well. So I think that's very relevant, especially nowadays where anything can set people off and it's very easy to start a ripple effect, especially when it comes to any kind of conflict. But other than that, the character of Koba is, of course, the antagonist of the story. That is such a well-written character because, and first off, all three of these movies don't have to be as good as they are, especially the latter two. Like, these movies easily could have gotten decent reviews, been a decent reboot, done all right financially, and not have elevated itself to what it is. But due to writing, due to direction, due to the overall production, it is way better than it needs to be. All three of them, really, but especially this one. And that character of Koba is a perfect example of that because he easily could have been just an angry, off-balanced ape who was like, no, I want to cause some violence. Let's start a war. And there's no real motivation for that. It could be a very shallow, whatever, throwaway villain. But there is those conversations between him and Caesar where Caesar's like, no, we don't have to harm these people. They didn't cause us harm, or I guess not that much harm. And we understand his point of view because he grew up with James Franco mostly, and he had a generally pretty safe, good upbringing because of them. And yet what's great is we understand Koba as well, because while we don't necessarily, or I didn't want to root for him, nor did I, we still understand where he's coming from, being the tortured, abused ape where he grew up in captivity, basically. And he shows Caesar all this like surgical incisions and other markings left by the experimentations. And he's like, human work, human work, human work. And we can fully get why he wants to not always cause harm or cause violence, but not come to any kind of agreement with them, because as is the case with any modern or historical conflict or warfare where a country will go into another with a military, with whoever, and the civilians there, perhaps just as an example, can only see the violence of those invaders. And like, why would I want to have any sort of relationship or peace with them? They're causing me harm. They're invading my country. They're controlling me in some ways. And so I think that's a very timely idea. And that gives you a very good basis for why Koba is the way he is. He's not just angry. He's like, well, I grew up in captivity. I was tortured. Of course, I'm going to hate them. I don't want to be around them. And then he also has some trigger happy tendencies, I guess you could say. And he, as I was saying earlier, he just commits one act with a few followers and then bam, the rest is history. So I think that's a very, very strong part of the movie. If I had to point out anything, and it's the same thing with Rise, is the human characters. As much as I love Gary Oldman and Kerry Russell and Jason Clarke, they are by far the weakest part of the movie in terms of writing. There's not a lot of depth there. And I understand you're meant to be with the apes more and care for Caesar the most. But at the same time, you are still spending a lot of time with the human characters. So if we weren't meant to care about them, to learn about them, they shouldn't have been on screen as much. And so really, if I had to point out any flaw, it would be that, which not a big deal. I still think the performances are great. Gary Oldman's amazing. Kerry Russell and Jason Clarke he's a really great character actor, in my opinion. He's very good. Visually, the movie is fantastic. And one big thing, and it's more so with Dawn and War, but also with Rise, is this is probably one of the only, if not the only, sci-fi franchise where if you take Apes and you're having Apes be the lead characters, where obviously you're having that done through motion capture animation. And really never once for me, maybe I'm in the minority here, I never was questioning that I was watching real apes on screen. Because if you think about it, if that was done in the wrong way due to whatever reason, these movies would be so shallow, so distant, so goofy. And it's the exact opposite in this case. Like, I was fully believing. There are times where I was thinking, oh yeah, like these aren't real apes. You know, it's really well done. It's perfectly done in all respects, visually, direction. The sign language is fantastic. I love that angle. And I just love how Dawn and War, more so even this one, how quiet they are at times. Like, there's big action and really a lot of big loud moments, and yet there's so much effectively quiet moments and sequences as well. And so that's another strong point that gives you that time to think about what's going on, think about those ideas, think about the characters and the nuances with Caesar and the apes in general in terms of their conflicts, their relationships with each other and with the humans. Also, apes on horseback, amazing. One of my favorite visuals probably in all of cinema. I love apes on horseback, and there's a lot of that in this movie. The big action sequence, like halfway, 2/3 of the way through, where the apes attack the human compound, and there's that tracking shot, like 360 shot, is really, really well done. Also, the moment towards the beginning where the humans encounter Caesar and the young ape is killed, and Caesar yells "go" at the humans. Like, that is such a powerful, visceral, chilling moment, both in performance and the direction. And that's like a holy crap moment reaction from the humans, and they get out of there. I love that moment. And talking about other things that I don't fully love or that aren't as good as other parts is, I think the ending showdown with Koba and Caesar, not that it's bad, but it does feel a little anticlimactic and a little generic in the sense that it's just two apes fighting each other in this rundown or abandoned building, and things are just crashing around, and it's really loud, and it's interesting, and I like the final resolution of that, but that feels a little smaller than the big action sequence where they attack the compound. It almost feels like tacked on in a way. Obviously, it's important because of the story, but in terms of the overall suspense, the creativity, it feels a little underwhelming in that way, but not a big deal because it's still an amazing movie despite the small flaws I have with it. Another great moment, and see, I could talk about these movies for hours, is, and it's a great performance moment by Jason Clarke, where he's taken by the apes into the ape village and he's being carried and he is looking upwards. And he just sees this long, like, hallway of apes staring down at him and hollering and screaming. Like, that's such a great piece of direction in terms of the fear of him, but also good performance by Clarke in terms of thinking, oh my God, like, am I going to die? What's going to happen? Am I going to be tortured, sacrificed? brutalized, whatever. Like, it's a really great introduction to the ape world through him. In terms of the other characters, like human characters, really love Gary Oldman and everything. Kerry Russell is good. There's not a lot to her character. And Cody Smith McPhee, don't love him in general. He's all right in this. And I do like his friendship with the ape in terms of looking at the drawings. I really like that. That's a touching moment. One thing that I understand that there's always this kind of person because there's Koba on that side who's the hothead in a sense. But in terms of the weaker writing, the hothead on the human side who is with Clark and all of them, that's basically the opposite of what I was talking about with the strength of Koba's character, where the human hothead, let's just call him that, is not really that well written. We don't really care about him. He's basically just hating on the apes to hate on him. Unless I miss something, there's not much motivation there. So I don't love that character. Kind of obnoxious. Doesn't really need to be there. I get the point of it in terms of plot, but not my favorite part of the movie. The score by Michael Giacchino is excellent, and I think he gets even better in War. I don't love him all the time. I think he's at times overused in Hollywood blockbusters. I wish they would have more variety, but he has grown a lot, I think, over the years in terms of changing up his styles and sounds. Other than that, not a whole lot else to say, really. It's really just fantastic. Can't praise it enough. Will always be up there with the best of the Apes franchise. I'm sure the next ones will probably be at least pretty good, but I think this and War especially will always be towards the very top, and it's deserving of even more praise than it already got. So that is a 5 out of 5.